Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Growing Your Firm Through New Practice Niches. I'm Bill Carlino. I'm the Managing Director of National Consulting Services for Transition Advisors, and I'll serve as your host for this afternoon's presentation. Thanks again for taking the time to join us. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. In order to receive your 1 CPE credit, you must complete 2 requirements, and that is we are a sponsor on the National Registry of CPA Sponsors per NASBA, the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy. So in order to receive the credit, you must complete the following 2 requirements. Participate in at least 3 of the 4 polling questions that will be presented during today's session. And number 2, complete the online evaluation. For those who registered for today's webinar directly through us, Transition Advisors, you will receive an email with a link to this online evaluation later this afternoon. Once these requirements are met, everyone will receive their CPE certificate within 10 working days. The attendee control panel, for those of you who have attended webinars before, I'm sure you're familiar with this, but I have to go over it once again. In order to fully participate in the webinar, just take a moment to familiarize yourself with the GoToWebinar control panel, which is should be located on the right hand of your screen. The orange arrow on the top of the control panel minimizes the size of the panel. During the presentation, all the attendees will be muted, but you can certainly communicate with us via the question box, which is located toward the bottom of the control panel. Please send us any questions or comments you may have during the webinar. All you need to do is simply type your question in the box and then click the send button. And time permitting, we have an hour. We're allotted an hour this afternoon. I'll try to answer all your questions following the presentation. If not, I'll try to, if you would email me, I'll try to get you an answer if time does not permit us. And we certainly welcome and encourage everyone's participation this afternoon. Just to look at some of the upcoming webinars that we will be offering, Transition Advisors, beginning next month on September 15th, a deadline I'm sure familiar to many of you in today's session, mergers, the how, why, when, and with whom. The following month, on October 22nd, we'll look at the 7-step roadmap for your merger, acquisition, or sale. And finally, on November 19th, we'll look at the keys to your partnership agreement. And for more information, we encourage you to visit our website at transitionadvisors.com for more information. Just a few little bullet points about us for those of you who may not be as familiar with us. And this is certainly not going to be an infomercial for our company. But we serve the accounting profession exclusively, public accounting. We have over 20+ years of experience. We've facilitated nearly 900 closings of accounting firms. We represent the buyer, the seller. We also have a number of consulting services that we offer, including document preparation review, valuation and due diligence. We draft partnership agreements, facilitate firm retreats. We help with business planning. And again, for more information, you could either call the toll-free number or just simply send me an email, and I'll be happy to direct you to the right person. And with that, on behalf of Transition Advisors, sit back and enjoy today's presentation. Let's look briefly at what we'll be covering today, the agenda. We'll look at today's fastest growing client niches. We'll look at how the economy has slowed down traditional or what is commonly known as organic growth. And we'll look at how to begin a new practice area from scratch. And of course, we'll look at some of the major hurdles firms face and hopefully some that you would avoid if you are interested in starting a new practice niche. Before we look at that, let's look at the accounting profession at a glance to just kind of take in the scope of public accounting. The revenue for public accounting is about $94 billion. And that includes everything from, say, Deloitte, the world's largest firm to the sole practitioner. There are about 109,000 firms, CPA firms in the country. I know you hear different figures. Perhaps some of you hear the figure of 45,000. The AICPA likes to cite that one. But you must remember that not all CPA firms are members of the AICPA, so they are counting their membership. So there are many firms who are not members of the AICPA. So the figure is about anywhere from 109 to 110,000. There are about 500,000 people in public accounting, and I don't know if any of you saw the news the other day. They've hired more accounting firms have hired more graduates this year than in the past 5 years. A story came out a couple of days ago. The growth in 2014 not all bad for the top 100 firms, a little over almost 8.5%, and all of them anywhere from 4 to 6%. So that's certainly encouraging news from just a couple of years ago. So I'll take those in. There are basically 3 ways to grow in this profession. And like our little friend showing you here on the right, organic, one client at a time. And that's certainly been the way many firms have grown over the years. It's proven, but and certainly time tested. But the problem is the economy since, say, 2008 has certainly blunted that. I mean, it's still certainly possible to grow organically, but it's just going to take a little longer. And the economic climate may not be as friendly. Mergers, and that's certainly been in the news. Many of you have, I doubt, who read the accounting press, the trade press. I think there's probably an announcement of a merger probably every other day. And we'll look at some of the top mergers and some of the startling statistics over the past 4 years about the pace of merger mania and why we think it's going to continue. And the third is, what many of you will hear this afternoon, is adding a new practice niche. And we're going to look on how all of those kind of combine with each other, how to work off each other. But those are the 3 ways to grow in today's public accounting market. So without further ado, let's look at some of them. And we come up to our first polling question of the afternoon. And as a reminder, you have to answer at least 3 of 4 today. So if our organizer, Nikki, if you'll open the poll, how many client practices does your firm currently offer? 2 to 4, 5 to 7, 8 to 10, more than 10. And we'll give the attendees a few minutes, or a few seconds to weigh in. And just a few more. Okay, hopefully everybody has had a chance to weigh in. And then if I can ask the organizer to close the first poll. Perfect. Okay. Niches are a function of client demand. And I'm not telling you probably anything you don't already know. Your clients, I'm sure many of you, are asking you to do more. And than maybe 10 years ago. And the firms need to be able to respond to that. Many firms are looking to leverage their core strengths and offer specialized niche services. And that basically will augur in, help both the firm and the client grow. And according to the AICPA, the more services a firm offers a client, the less likely they are to leave. Many of you know there's probably no less loyal a client than a very low-end 1040 client. They'll go across the street for maybe $10 less. But if you offer them, if you do tax and you offer them maybe financial planning, if they take anywhere from 3 to 4 services from you, the percentage that they're going to leave is greatly reduced, because then they have to find a firm that will offer all those services. So that's why we think growing client niches and offering services like that is so critical with regard to client retention. And we all know it's all about client retention. Again, the evolution of client services. We'll look at a little more deeply. CPAs are gradually moving away from services-driven and strategy-driven. Basically, they're asking the client, how can we make this? What can we do for you? How can we do that? They're mapping out strategies rather than just rote services. It's a much more analytical and certainly technology and the progressive leadership, and how accounting firms have grown, have certainly progressed since 1980. We're going to look a little bit at that just in a few slides, but it's become much more of an analytical thing. They're driving their business where they want to be in lieu of businesses taking them where they don't want to be. Decision making is becoming faster. Organizations are becoming decentralized. So, and if you notice, especially, and I would say that this is true for many of the larger CPA firms, particularly those in the top 100 tier, the managing partner is slowly morphing into kind of more of a CEO role. And if you look at the websites of many of the top 100 firms, you'll see not only do they have what was known perhaps a few years ago as the managing partner, known by the CEO role, but you're also seeing now they also have chief operating officers, COO. They're filling out that whole C-suite. Many of them even have chief marketing officers. I'm sure many of you listening today do as well. So we're looking at the evolution. Now, some of the niche services, let me just get them here. Here's some of them. Attest, obviously, everything old is new again. Mergers and acquisitions, and we're going to go into the reasons for that a little bit later. State and local taxes, SALT. Specializations in industries. We're seeing a little more of that. Litigation support, forensic accounting, that type of thing, and nonprofits. And of course, estate trust and gift planning. These are niche services that many accounting firms have reported growth in over the past year. Let's look at some of the other things, and I want to concentrate on one in particular. Distribution, obviously IT consulting is becoming a huge thing. SOC, which is kind of a sophisticated third-party assessment. Many of the technology savvy firms are going into that. Telecommunications, news media. We're going to look at a firm out on the West Coast that's really made carved out a niche in that. Entertainment and hospitality. We'll look at some firms that have really made their mark there. Manufacturing. And something called BPO, which is an acronym for Business Process Outsourcing. That's basically, and that's a function of many of the cloud applications that are available today. Many businesses simply cannot afford a full-time chief financial officer. So what they're doing is they're outsourcing a lot of their client write-up work, financial statement work to the smaller accounting firms. They're serving as actual virtual CFOs. And that's particularly relevant with the smaller firms, especially those firms who are virtual. And with today's cloud applications, you'll see a statistic in, I believe it's the next slide, about how many new startup firms are actually virtual. Now, many of you who have been in the profession a long time, think of the feasibility of a virtual firm even 10 years ago. And we'll see how many now are becoming virtual. Some of the top client categories, again, manufacturing, mid-sized businesses, which is huge, 20 million of them approximately throughout the U.S. Real estate, again, technology, construction, a huge niche. In fact, many of our clients are in that. Nonprofits, again, and this is according to our friends over at Accounting Today. So these are some of the top client categories that we're seeing in growth in, actually. All right, mergers. And you see our little puzzle there. One way to grow. Merger mania. I spoke about that a few slides back. And look at this next statistic. There have been over 500 mergers of accounting firms just over the past 2 years. And those are just the ones that make the trade press. The little 1- and 2-person firms that get kind of lost in the shuffle, those don't even get reported. So 500 deals over the past 2 years. And it shows no sign of slowing down. Just 2 years ago, look at this next one. 55 out of the top 100 reported facilitating at least one merger. So over the half of the top 100 firms in this country completed a merger 2 years ago. That's sort of an incredible statistic. Just some of them that you may have heard about. KPMG, a Big Four firm, wanted to, this ties into our theme for today. They wanted to increase their expertise in financial institutions and particularly hedge funds. They absorbed Rothstein Cass, which was a major player in that field, and a top 100 firm for years in New York City. They absorbed them. Baker Tilly and SS&G. SS&G had a lot of, they're out of the Cleveland, Ohio area. They had a lot of practice areas, particularly their expertise in food service and restaurants. And Baker Tilly absorbed them. So you see, they wanted to grow that sector. Cohn Resnick, a big firm here in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, acquired Watkins Megan. Elliott Davis, Joseph DeCosimo. These are some of, like I said, these are some of the big ones. And that's also given birth, and again, it ties into what we're talking about today, is what I like to refer to as multidisciplinary transactions, meaning that there are mergers, but they are not necessarily mergers of two accounting firms. As an example, Deloitte wanted to build up its life sciences niche. They acquired this compliance implementation concern. KPMG, again, to bolster its HR services, they acquired that division from the consulting firm of Towers Watson. E&Y acquired another consulting company, Parthenon. Friedman, another top 100 firm, acquired Sounding Board, which is basically a turnaround consulting firm for their consulting division. Citrin Cooperman, another big firm here in the Northeast, just recently acquired Real-Time Computing. I believe that was last week, and that is an IT consulting company, and that boosts their IT services niche. So you see, we're seeing a lot more of these what I like to call more multidisciplinary transactions. Not to say that we're not going to see mergers of accounting firms, but this is certainly something that's going to stay on the radar for a long time to come. Let's look at some of the reason behind the surge in M&A. Geography, new markets. As I mentioned at the outset, we deal a lot we have a lot of M&A clients, and it's not only they want to bolster their own market, but a lot of them want to go into new markets. We're getting calls from Eastern firms that want to go down to Florida, or they want to go into the Midwest, or even out to California. So geography in new markets obviously is a primary reason. Competition. Since 2008, the competition, I'm not telling you anything again that you folks don't already know, but the competition certainly has increased. Everybody's vying for business. You're seeing people in upper tiers going to bidding for business that perhaps they would not have prior to the recession, and that's still going on. So perhaps a regional firm or even below that can't compete with a big four firm in terms of resources may look for a merger of equals so they can use that synergy to compete for business. Lack of a formal succession plan. Now that's certainly not where we have a number of resources on our website and CPE that we do on succession planning, and that's certainly not going to be what we're going to talk about today. But just as just to tell you that cite a shocking statistic: 70% of the firms in the country with 15 or less people do not have a formal succession plan. So you can see the incredible elements that are kind of sparking this M&A surge. But like I said, we're here to talk about new niches, and obviously new niches belongs in that reason. Perhaps many firms don't have the internal resources to start a new practice niche, so they'll look outside. And that's one of the decisions or one of the factors that we're going to look at today is whether firms go internally or externally to build out a new practice niche. And there's certainly pros and cons to each of them, and we'll try to examine them in a little more detail. But those are the what we like to refer to as the primary drivers between the surge in M&A. And we come to our second polling question of the afternoon. And again, remind you that you have to answer at least 3 of them. Has your firm established any new client niches over the past year? Yes, we're currently in the process. No, we're thinking about it. No, we're satisfied with our current offerings. So we'll give everyone about 30 seconds to think about it, weigh in, and we'll start up right after that. Okay, a couple more seconds, and then I'll ask the organizer to close the poll. Okay. Thank you, Nikki. And we'll go on. Let's look at what's keeping practitioners up at night. Probably a lot of these same things that are keeping you folks up at night, just like our little sleepless friend to the right there. Firms are facing fee pressure from existing clients. I doubt many of you who are listening today have a client who hasn't resisted a fee increase. And obviously, you need to do that. You need to increase your fees. Perhaps you've expanded your scope of services, but you know the clients want more for what they're paying. And as our theme revolves today, we need to expand beyond the traditional services to stay competitive. Boutique offerings and other distinguishing services. As I said, clients demanding more interaction and personal services from their CPA. Now, I like to say that that's a unintended consequence of technology. While technology has probably revolutionized the way CPA firms operate more than anything, what it's also done is make the client interaction a little more impersonal. You may speak with your clients, you know, on a regular basis, email them, but how many times are they actually in your office? You're doing a face-to-face. For most firms, it's probably around tax time. If someone says, I only want to work 3 more years, but I can't transition my clients, well, we like to say is yes, but if your clients are only in your office 1 time a year, that's really only 3 visits. So it's really not that big a deal. Same ditto for 4 years, ditto for 5 years. That's 5 visits. And what I found is the AICPA did a study about you know, the state of accounting firm clients, and they found that over 1/3 of them said they're considering switching firms. Not that they would necessarily do it, but they're actually considering it. And you know what the #1 reason was? The #1 reason is they feel their CPA does not provide enough personal attention. Again, that's an unintended consequence of technology. But 1/3 of your clients at this moment, if these statistics hold true, are considering switching. Again, I don't want to hit the panic button for everyone. Many of them won't, but they are considering it. So that might be something to keep in mind. That was then, this is now. Again, before the economy crashed back in 2008, there was plenty of business to go around. I mean, many CPAs were basically order takers. Now, more traditional work, what we call Type A work or Type 1 work, is more competitively bid. Unfortunately, what we saw back, you know, when the floor started collapsing, started caving in, we saw a lot of lowballing, where the lowest price and not the best client services necessarily won out. You know, the clients were in financial trouble. The accounting firms, the ripple effect started affecting them. So price became obviously often an insurmountable issue. So that's like what I used to call, I like to call a race to the bottom on lowballing. And firms, so therefore, firms with strong niche capabilities have a lot more negotiating power when it comes not only to winning new business, but client retention. And again, I can't emphasize the importance of client retention. This is one of my favorite slides. This is not your father's CPA firm. And you can't run a CPA firm in 2015 like you did in 1980. Now, during the year, as you can imagine, I visit a fair amount of CPA firms, and you'd be amazed, maybe you wouldn't, at how many firms still run like 1980. We're seeing a gradual move toward value pricing, value billing. About 10 to 15% now use some form of value pricing and value billing system. Firms moving toward a one-partner, one-firm concept and individual books of business. And we find that to be true, especially among what we call partner-loyal firms versus brand-loyal firms. Now, what I mean by that is, if you take a firm like Deloitte or Ernst & Young, those are traditionally partner-loyal firms. I mean, brand-loyal firms. People go there because they've been going there for years, but they rarely see the the person who works on their account. As opposed to partner loyal firms, which is obviously many of you, Jane or John, they have their clients because of you. So those partners are loyal to the people that they're familiar with in the smaller firms, and not necessarily. But you're seeing a lot more movement to that, and it also makes client transition a lot easier because there's no more individual books of business, no more Lone Ranger mentality, more remote workers. In 1995, which was only 20 years ago, there were 9.5 million remote workers. Now there are, in 2012, that figure jumped to 13.5 million, and now more than 30 million people work remotely at least once a week, and that includes all the members of our company. We're also seeing a greater use of mobile devices. More than 90% of CPAs use smartphones or tablets, and between you and me, I think that figure is rather conservative. I doubt there's a person listening today that doesn't have either. And that's also given the rise to birth to virtual firms. And as I mentioned today, about 10% of all the startup firms are indeed virtual. You don't need bricks and mortar anymore. With the adoption of cloud applications, you can basically start an accounting firm in Starbucks, and a lot of people have. Not necessarily in Starbucks, but you get my drift. Maybe in a shared office or a Regis office or something like that. But that's given the birth to these startup firms. So about 10% are all virtual. In fact, one of the first startup firms I'd ever encountered was one. The CEO lived in San Diego. The CFO lived in Michigan, and the chief marketing officer lived in Atlanta, and they were all connected remotely, and they rarely had meetings except remotely. Okay, top concern: how to bring in new clients, and we're going to show how niches. AICPA recently polled nearly 600 firms in 5 size classes: sole pracs, 2 to 5 professionals, 6 to 10 professionals, 11 to 20 professionals, and 21 plus professionals, and I'm sure that includes just about everybody listening today. And bringing in new clients ranked, you can see where it ranked, number 1 concern in 3 out of the 5 firm size classes, and no lower than 3rd among any of the groups. And let's see if we can help rectify that today. Okay, as far as client niches, CPA firms, they used to try to be the client's most trusted Costco. Those of you who are familiar with Costco know what that's like to shop there. Firms' websites often highlighted as many as 15 different client services. But if you really dug deep, if you really went down on the website, I bet you less than half of those actually had a partner in charge of those particular client services. To be fair, many of them did, but you can't. And the danger of offering too many niches is what happens is you overpromise and you underdeliver, and that is the absolute worst case client scenario. And hopefully this afternoon we'll find out ways to avoid that, so you can get started. Do your due diligence. All right. Now let's get to the meat of it. Define the niche that you want to be in. Don't go into a niche simply because you've decided we need a new practice niche. That's fine. You've made a decision. But define that niche. And like anything else, you wouldn't do any work for clients without some due diligence. Nobody would enter a merger without doing extensive due diligence. This is absolutely no different. You have to do your due diligence. Identify the key drivers in the service lines, and then begin interacting in that particular market, and then make a determination whether that's viable. All right, so the key drivers. And we're going to go into that a little bit later, just exactly how to do that. Outline how the firm and the potential clients of that service are going to find each other. Great, you started let's say you started a construction niche. Well, how are you going to find clients in that? So that's got to be on paper. You've got to have a viable plan. You just can't say we're going to start a construction niche. That's practice niches 101. And then you've got to determine the channels of distribution. And I'm going to go into that in just a little bit later. But again, define that niche that you want to be in, whether it's restaurants, whether it's litigation support, cost segregation, wealth management. We've seen how that's grown over the years. Again, take a moment to look at those bullet points. Okay, Here's three critical questions that everybody needs to answer who's considering starting a new practice niche. How well, the first one obviously is, how well is your firm aligned with the niche you're targeting? Second one is, what, if any, are the current trends in that industry niche? How well is that niche doing currently over the past 3 years? And you know, the secret to finding out all that is what we call the research call. And that is a critical component of starting a new practice niche. And here's how the research call would work. All right? Say, for example, firm ABC wants to start a construction niche. They're looking at perhaps there's a lot of building going on. Some of the burgeoning cities, we know there's a lot of development and construction, and that's it. So how do you do that? Okay, number one is you either use what a 1980 firm would use, the yellow pages, or you could simply use Google or one of the search engines. Find out some of the major construction companies in your area. Now, I can't emphasize this enough. It's critical that you don't ask for business during the research call. It's a research call, that's all it is. Now, you find out who's in charge, and you say, can I spend 30 minutes either in person or on the phone with who's ever in charge of this particular construction company? And usually, if you make it clear that you're not looking for business, because they would view it as a sales call. You say, I want to find out the trends, why you're successful. Trust me, a lot of executives love to talk about themselves. I call it the Donald Trump syndrome. They're not shy about talking about their successes. Ask them, how the market is, or her, who's ever in charge. What are the trends you're seeing? What are the drawbacks? What are some of the problems? And then sort of summarize it, and then take it back to your staff. But I can't overemphasize the importance of the research call. Research as a whole is critical, but the research call is something that must be done if you're looking to start a new practice niche. There's some more questions. Is that niche underserved in your practice area? If you're a firm in Florida, let's take auto dealerships. There's a ton of auto dealerships. In fact, one of the firms we're going to look at somewhat later in the presentation has carved such a niche in that they actually authored the guide for the AICPA on car dealerships. So is the niche underserved? If it's overserved, you're probably best to look elsewhere. If you're in an area where there's not a lot of construction, or you have, or your local municipality has severe restrictions on development, like the area I live in, that's probably not an area you'd want to go into. Maybe you look at your local food service community, or are there a lot of high net worth individuals who live in your practice area? Wealth planning might be something that you would want to go to, or family office, something like that. Do they have growth potential? That ties into whether it's underserved or overserved. And perhaps more importantly is, do you have any clients in that niche presently, any existing clients? Because if you do, that's going to make your transition that much easier. So those are the things that you've got to look at. And who's going to be the champion of that niche in your firm? Do you have somebody internally that you could designate that will lead that practice area? Perhaps it's one of your young emerging partners. Maybe you've got some talent on the bench with some expertise who will champion that. But it's critical that you find your internal champion, someone that's going to lead that. Put them in charge of growing that niche, or starting that niche, or however deeply you're involved in it. But it's imperative that you locate that person. And partner buy-in. This cannot be overemphasized. If you're a 5-partner firm and 3 want to do it and 2 don't, then it's probably basically moot, depending on your governance guidelines. If it's 1 partner, 1 vote, you're sunk. As an aside, I can remember back when I was at Accounting Today, I did a story on a firm excuse me, that had decided to go paperless, but it took 6 years for all the partners to buy in, which stalled their progress. So I can't emphasize how critical partner buy-in is. So make sure you have that. Let's look at some other things. And how are you going to market these new services to existing and new clients? How are you going to perhaps cross-selling? If you have a tax client and you decided to adopt wealth management, that's an easy segue. If you have a construction client, then cost seg is probably an easy segue. If you do a lot of divorce work, obviously forensic is an easy segue. But you get my drift. So you have to understand how you're going to market it. Do you market it internally? Do you require the services of an outside professional? That's sort of your call on how to do that. So let's look at some of the advantages. We had talked about forging a competitive point of difference, and that's obviously what Growth Niches does. If firm A offers tax and audit and firm B offers tax and audit, but also wealth planning, and I'm a client, I need three of those services. Which firm am I going to go to? So obviously it forges, and with the not to keep harping on the economy, but since 2008, the competition, as many of you know, has only increased, and so that forges a competitive point of difference, makes it easier for client decisions, and certainly, as I mentioned before, citing back to that AICPA survey, also makes it easier for client retention the more services that you offer. It also, what it does is it positions you as experts in a crowded marketplace for whatever. Oh, firm A, B, and C. Oh, those are the construction guys. They know all about that. Or they have a lot of assets under management, so they're real good at financial planning. So basically, it positions your firm as not only as the most trusted advisor, which is the age-old tagline for CPAs, but also as an expert, and that's what you want to be known as, an expert in a crowded marketplace. Increases the client focus. Can you help them with a problem? The client is more likely to obviously will come to you anyway, but once you position yourself as an expertise, the client may come to you more often, and that, and the upside to that is is referrals. Maybe they have people who they have friends and businesses who face the same problem. So there's always the referral aspect of that. So you can see. And specialty firms, obviously, they get more specific than what I like to refer to as those practices that are more generalist in nature. Again, just not to demean tax and audit. There's certainly critical components of the 21st century accounting firm. But again, the specialty of the boutique firms tend to get noticed more. And we're going to look at some firms that have reacted to, say, changes in the landscape, and some that have really forged competitive points of differences, and they've become almost nationally known. Let's look at some of the caution flags. We had mentioned some roadblocks. Again, this is what I like to refer to as ready, fire, aim. You create a niche without the necessarily support, the ancillary support, billings, referral sources. So yeah, you hang out a shingle, and then you have no clients. So basically, what you're doing is, you've made an expensive investment that's not getting any kind of return. It's a new niche has got to be an annuity. So again, to create a niche without necessarily wanting to make more money is fine, but and that's certainly an underlying reason, but it shouldn't be the only reason. I want to make more money. I was going to say, you want to make more money, get a second job. So that's it. Lack of intellectual capital. And what I mean by that is maybe you don't have the expertise in-house to launch, say, a niche in construction, but try to do it anyway. So that could probably be worse. And you don't really have a viable growth strategy. You just hope it'll grow. And you're going to see something about don't set unrealistic goals as far as growth. Again, give a top-down assessment of your in-house talent. And if you don't have it, you're going to probably have to go externally, either poach talent from a competing accounting firm or via a merger. And don't ignore, don't start a practice niche at the expense of your core strengths. If you're really strong in, say, state and local, don't ignore that. You can use that. You can use the synergy off that. Just don't Too many firms I've seen have started a new practice niche and they've devoted so much time and effort into growing this thing that they've kind of let what brought them to the dance sort of fall by the wayside. So that's not something that you certainly want to do. You certainly want to keep active in your core announcements. Our third polling question: if you were to start a new client niche, what strategy would you pursue? Train an existing partner, begin from scratch, try to recruit an experienced niche partner, execute a merger, or none of the above? And if the organizer will keep it open for about another 30 seconds, we'll let everybody weigh in. Another few seconds, and then I think we could close the poll. Okay, thank you, Nikki. Again, if anybody, just to reiterate, you don't have to wait till the end of the presentation. If anybody has a question, feel free to type it in. And like I said, as time permits, I'll try to get to as many as I possibly can. But obviously we are limited in time today. All right. Determine client need. Again, how to begin. Determine your client need. Is there going to be a cross-selling opportunity? Again, we'll look at the example of wealth management in your tax clients. You know, you're already handling sensitive financial information for your clients. Wealth management should just be the next logical step to that. Again, develop a market-based approach, not an idea-based approach. What I mean by that is determine if there is indeed an opportunity in your client base. Because if there's not, then you're going to have to mine a whole new set of clients. And as we know, and that ties into new business development, and that can be a whole separate issue. So, and again, developing the expertise. Do you build it in-house or through an acquisition? And you got to weigh the pros and the cons of each. I said, if you don't have that champion in your firm, then you probably you're going to go outside. And that can be, like I said, either through poaching existing talent that you know of in a firm that offers that niche, or through an acquisition or merger. And again, there's pros and cons to each. So this is not obviously this is not a decision that has to be made lightly, or should be made lightly for any reason. Let's look at some of the others. You know, develop your pricing and profitability model, your KPIs or key performance indicators or key financial indicators in this place. That's going to basically serve as a guide for your sales and marketing strategies. And then what you've got to do is you've got to determine your go-to market strategy. How about your sales teams? You know, your primary and secondary sales teams. Your development of materials. Again, do you get a professional marketing firm to develop those, or do you have the ability in-house to develop those? Education. Everybody's got to be aware of this. Internal education. Expect your client pipeline and your sales process. How is it going to work? You expect, is it going to be modest returns the first year and then kind of measure it after that? Referral sources. Again, that is another bullet point here that cannot be overemphasized. Referral sources are going to be key into developing a new practice niche. And then you've got to do some PR and launch some communications. How are you going to let your clients know? Via letter, via phone call? Perhaps you separate your clients in client A, client B. Your A clients, maybe they get either a phone call or a personal visit. You know, some people might get just a call. Some people might actually get a letter announcing your new. But always make it, you know, always build up the synergy that represents to the existing value of your firm. I can't emphasize that strong enough. That it's good. You have to kind of capitalize on that synergy. Let's look at. I had mentioned a few slides back. Let's look at some firms with some other successful niche services. Some of them you may know, some of them you may not. Many of them are larger firms, but I just wanted to illustrate an example. One of them is Armanino McKenna, which is a very, very fast and well-respected growing firm out in the San Francisco Bay Area. They actually launched the media group a number of years ago, which deals in public relations, crisis management, advertising, marketing, services, and brand development. And what they did was they don't even have a CPA running that division. they got an editor from one of the business journals, kind of brought him on board, and now they're running that. I mentioned the Baker Tilly and SS&G. One of the SS&G prior to the merger, I guess it still is, one of the largest restaurant consulting groups in the country. They used to run, some of you may have even taken it, the Restaurant CFO Boot Camp. And also they did a benchmarking update for hospitality, for all the hospitality industry. And since that's like a $500–600 billion industry, that certainly shows some upside and some potential to go there. I had mentioned auto dealerships. Perhaps the one firm that rises above the others in this is the MBAF down in Miami. And since they started their auto dealership back in 1972. Richard Nixon was president. That shows you how long ago they started that. And then what they do is they author the auto dealership manual that the AICPA publishes. So they've really, really carved a niche down in that South Florida area with that. RBZ, many of you might be familiar with this. Their specialty is law firms. And the quintessential law firm report is the RBZ Law Firm Report. It is just broken down into incredible detail and data about size of the firm, location, practice area, partner comp, that type of thing. So RBZ has really made a name for itself with law firms. And Kearney and Aronson, two firms that you may or may not be familiar with, they are two of the top firms in the country for government contractors. They do a lot of government work there. They're nationally known for that. And you say, well, that's all fine, Bill. These are huge, huge firms, but I'm a small firm. Tell you what, I'll give you one more example. There's a gentleman out in Montana. His name is Joseph Eve. His specialty is Indian reservations. That's what he does. Okay, so there's a guy out in an area where he found a niche and capitalized on it. He does Indian and gaming reservations. So it can work either large or small. So there's no set thing. Anybody can start a successful practice niche. Okay, let's see. Necessity is the mother of invention. All of you have certainly been reading about Obamacare. It was passed, then it was challenged, then it was passed again. Once it passed the first time, ID Bailey, a top 100 firm out in the Great Plains, they debuted something called an Employer Health Reform Analytics Service, and that was a practice area designed to help business owners respond to the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, which is the formal name for Obamacare. As you can see, the services includes counseling and employee insurance, and I'm sure many of your clients have a lot of questions regarding the ACA. And kind of explain to them about how the regional and federal health exchanges work. And there are more CPA firms that have certainly followed suit. And let's look at some of the factors that can determine niche success. Combination of market conditions, and a committed leader. Again, second bullet point, don't relegate your established, don't forget your core offerings, such as tax and audit. Fire on all cylinders is what I like to say. The development of strategy consists of three dynamics: services, channels of distribution, and targets. So this involves selection, innovation, and packaging. Again, packaging, PR, marketing. Know how you're going to go to market with this, because getting the message out is critical. And don't forget to network. And I can't, again, another thing I can't emphasize enough, networking is critical, okay? Again, business valuations or litigation support. Do you interact with legal associations, perhaps the divorce attorneys? Everybody's got an association. There's an association for everything today. Restaurants, every state has a food service or restaurant association. Go there. There's a ton of state and local trade shows you can go to kind of trawl for business. Cost segregation, again, builders groups or related associations. Trade press. I would encourage everyone to read the business press that's associated with each of these, and trust me, there's a ton of business-to-business publications that will address all of this. Hit the ground running, yes. Find, again, that niche leader within your firm, or go out and get one. Niche champions should be equal parts analytical, strategic, and they've got to be leaders. Again, assign practical revenue and growth metrics to the new undertaking. Don't play catch as catch can. Remember, the smart money is on specialization, not generalization. And niche specialties, again, are a value proposition. Not only does it position your firm as experts, but again, it will help you in mining for new business. Most firms offer traditional tax and accounting. My advice to you is don't be like most firms. Again, they're going to perceive you as an expert. And firms that complement those with client niches, with specializations, are ultimately going to win the client engagements. It's that simple. Okay? And finally, our last polling question of the day: which niche that you don't offer are you most likely consider? And there's a couple of key ones: business valuations, financial planning, lit support, and cost seg. And we'll give everybody 30 seconds. Remember, you've got to answer at least 3 of 4. If you've answered 3 already, you don't have to answer this one, but you need 3 of 4 to get your CPE credits. Okay, a couple more seconds. Okay, Nikki, if we can close the polls, that'd be great. Let's look at some today's takeaways. Determine your need. Use a market-based strategy, not an idea-based strategy. Again, we've covered that. Look inside and outside for niche specialists. Find the champion in your firm. And remember the 7 P's. Proper prior planning prevents piss-poor performance. Excuse my language, but I learned that years ago, and I've never saw any reason to dismiss that. So that concludes today's presentation. And again, for more information, we encourage you to visit the AICPA Succession Planning Resource Center, which will give you white papers and articles and everything you would need to know. I want to thank everyone for taking the time today. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. My contact information is on the slide, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have regarding growth niches or succession planning, whatever. So again, thanks for attending, and everyone, enjoy the rest of your day.